Three friends, Ben, Matt, and Wes, graduated high school and unfortunately had to grow up and disperse in 2007. Now as adults, they are reuniting to talk about all the films they couldn't see together back then. Get to know this close friendship with me, Emily, as we sit down, have a drink, and discuss these movies.
Welcome to I Drink Your Podcast, where we drink and talk about movies from 2007.
Can't stop what's coming.
So, cool beans?
Cool beans.
Mixing his character and his real name, okay.
We have fun.
How about a suicide pact?
What are you trying to be, an Irish R&B singer?
Oh, it's because he's 60 years old. 60 years old. The alcohol's working.
We need water.
I drink your podcast. I drink it up.
Okay, welcome everybody to the first episode of I Drink Your Podcast. I want to welcome everyone just to the show. And before we start off and introduce everyone, just be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes. All that stuff helps us out. Share us with 3 to 5 of your friends. And just if you guys are excited for some movies from 2007, we're going to get into it over the next year. But I am Matt, and with me today is Ben.
Hey, everybody. So I've got a special drink in front of me, and if you want to see what I'm drinking and how to make it, go ahead and go to our Facebook page or our Instagram and see the video of me making this specialty drink. It is a blood orange milkshake.
Ew. But at the same time, maybe cool. And let's just get around the horn. Let's make sure to introduce everyone else real quickly. We have Wesley as well.
Hi. Today, Matt, since you asked so kindly, I'm drinking what I'm calling a bloody screwdriver. Because I am in quarantine and haven't ventured out into the world, I used what I had, and I mixed vodka with orange juice and cranberry juice.
Ew. Gross.
What do you mean? You have no taste.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, it is delicious.
And that last voice you heard was Emily. Go ahead
everyone.
and introduce yourself and tell us what you're drinking. I was going to ask you guys all after you were introduced what you were drinking, but that's fine.
No, we're taking over
It's
the
okay.
show.
Matt just can't read instructions very well, everyone. It's fine. I'm drinking a milkshake inspired by our movie, and I only had Cinnabon ice cream, so I'm having some Fireball whiskey with Cinnabon ice cream and a little bit of some chocolate drizzled oil on top.
That one sounds good. I just want to go ahead and defend myself real quickly. It says, welcome Ben, Wes, and Emily, and then tell us, it doesn't say and then, but it says, and we tell us what we were drinking. Whatever. I have a glass of milk, and I have a jar of whiskey bourbon, which is Evan Williams' Kentucky bourbon. So I figured I'd do a shot of bourbon and chase it with milk. The same thing that HW got in this
Matt's not making it through this episode.
His night-night juice.
So what movie are we talking about today?
Well, today we're talking about There Will Be Blood, which is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and features Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Dano, and Ciarán Hinds. And before we jump into the movie, Wesley, why don't you just tell us kind of what we're in for today?
Yeah, so during the first half of the podcast, we'll just be discussing and reviewing this 2007 movie. And the second half was going to feature a Battle of the Twits, where we have creative competition between Ben and Matt inspired by the movie.
Yeah, awesome. So just to kind of provide a little introduction of ourselves to you, the audience, where were you all and what were you doing in 2007? Matt?
So you guys know, little old Matt was chilling in Japan, right? That was the first year of being in the Air Force for me. I'd abandoned my friends in Minnesota. Give me the blood. Yeah, I was in Japan. What about you guys? What were you guys up to?
I was attending college in my sophomore year, living with Ben, actually. But mostly, just being a completely upstanding citizen and contributing to the community.
Yeah, right. At Mankato State.
Where all the good boys go.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly what year of schooling I was in 2007, because I was in school from anywhere between 5 and 8 years, depending on if you count dropping out for a short time.
Usually that counts.
Super senior.
Yeah, one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast was because this was the year that Matt left us. So we wanted to just kind of get back together and watch all these movies together that we missed going to see in theaters and those experiences we had with them. And then we invited along Emily. Hey, Emily.
Hi, yeah, I'm just some rando that hasn't seen a lot of these movies, and so I joined the fun. But I'm also a lot younger than these old farts.
You
In
guys hear that?
2007,
She thinks it's fun.
sometimes it can be. In 2007, I was in 8th grade in Duluth, Minnesota, thinking I was the shit because I was finally at the top of the middle school chain. I was in both band and orchestra because I was a huge nerd. My group of friends and I ignored all the popular kids and lived in our own little world of playing imaginary baseball at recess. We were very cool.
Can Duluth not afford regular baseballs? Like, why is it imaginary?
Imaginary baseball. No, I did hit a home run. Like, no, you pop flied out, you son of a bitch. Like,
I'm not even kidding you. This is true. And I don't remember what our rules were, but yes, this is what we did with our time during recess in 8th grade.
Well, Emily, you're welcome here.
You can...
Yeah, so what do you all love about film? And then follow up with what's your favorite movie you've ever seen?
Can you start us off with that? That's a...
No, he's not starting us off with that. I'm starting us off with that,
Okay.
actually. I love how film transport me somewhere else, similar to books and video games. I wouldn't call myself a movie buff, but I've been kind of figuring it out from you three, but also from my husband, Corbin. The whole escaping reality and enjoying a fantasy helped distract me from my own mental health struggles and maybe help me with that too. I don't know. But I don't really know how to choose a favorite movie. I have a lot, and many of them are animated films or sci-fi or fantasy. But the two that really stand out to me right now are Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, extended cut, obviously.
It's like 5 movies.
And I know, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. That's me. Wesley, what are you thinking?
Things I like about movies, I love to be excited and surprised by a film. That can happen in many ways for me, though. Like, it doesn't have to be just the story or the emotions that you're made to feel. I'm also a really big sucker for exciting colors or unexpected jokes. I'm mostly looking for something that's new and I haven't seen before or experienced. And like Emily, I truly can't pick a favorite movie. New movies are often better than what I have as my favorites, but for some reason they can never replace what the classics are in my heart. So I just got to go with my two favorites of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Fifth Element.
Oh, I love those.
Combined, I've probably watched those two movies over 200 times easily.
Nice.
What about you, Matt?
I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat in that regard of like, it's so hard to choose a favorite. If I told you what my favorite was growing up, it was Forrest Gump. But, you know, I think like I've come around to the idea that I just love being entertained. I love popcorn flicks. So, you know, the Marvel universe really exploded with Iron Man. So I love Iron Man and I loved Doctor Strange. I think the ending to that film was kind of fantastic. But yeah, I think I would have to go with like, you know, those popcorn flicks and then Forrest Gump.
I love film just because of the collaborative nature of it. I love how many people it takes to get one of these Hollywood movies off the ground and how much passion and work goes into them. And I appreciate like looking at the work that's being done through a critical eye and really just trying to engage with a film the way the director intended and try to like not necessarily leave my baggage behind, but like try to see it through the director's eyes. And my favorite movie is actually by the director of today's movie, but it is not this movie. My favorite movie is Magnolia from 1999.
Tom Cruise is pretty good in that.
Yes, he is. They're all really good in that.
Never seen it.
If you thought this movie was long, that movie's 3 hours long.
And
But
it's
better.
weird.
And there's more color. We need to start a list of movies that Emily hasn't seen.
It's a long list. It's many of these 2007 movies.
Oh, perfect. That's why you're hired.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've traveled over half our state to be here tonight. I couldn't get away sooner because my new well was coming in at Coyote Hills and I had to see about it. Ladies and gentlemen, if I say I'm an oil man, you will agree. I'm a family man. I run a family business. This is my son and my partner, H.W. Plainview.
You boys are a regular family business.
Now, you have a great chance here.
My son is a healer and a vessel for the Holy Spirit. He has a church.
And you will be cast up and thrust back to perdition!
I'm fixed like no other company in this field. I have a string of tools ready to put to work. That's why I can guarantee to start drilling and to put up the cash to back my word. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what the others promise to do, when it comes to the showdown, they won't be there.
Why don't we start getting into There Will Be Blood with just a quick plot summary of Act 1. The movie opens with 15 minutes of visual storytelling as we're introduced to Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. He's a silver prospector with steely resolve, and this is evidenced by him dragging his broken-legged body across the desert of New Mexico, what looked like miles. After procuring some money through his mining prospects, he discovers oil in California and decides to start an oil drilling company. One of his workers, who is a father of a young baby, dies in the well, and Daniel decides to raise the child as his own. The child, HW, is used by Daniel as his partner in oil drilling to sell himself as a family man as he attempts to buy land to drill. Enter Paul Sunday, a young man who comes to Daniel with information about a potential oil field that his family lives on. Daniel pays Paul for this info and heads to the Sunday Ranch and attempts to purchase the land from the Sundays. He is blocked by Eli, Paul's twin brother, both played by Paul Dano, who demands a large sum of money for the purchase of the land so Eli can build his church. In addition to the Sunday farm, Daniel buys up all the land around the farm, with the exception of a piece of land owned by William Bandy. Eli asks to bless the well once it's built, but instead, Daniel slights Eli and does the blessing himself, introducing the central conflict of the movie.
Okay, wonderings. Did they name him Daniel Plainville because the main character, Plainview, whatever his name is, did they name him that because it was Daniel Day-Lewis? I was like, Daniel and Daniel,
And Paul.
I do think there's something to a method actor being tethered to the real world through the use of his real name.
Oh.
To make sure Daniel Day-Lewis didn't, completely lose himself in the character. They just well, we'll call him Daniel too, so that he can stay on this earth a little bit.
Right.
Well, this was based off a short story by Upton Sinclair, right? Oil.
I think it's a novel.
Yeah, but they only used half of it or something.
No, Matt thinks anything over one page is a novel.
Oh.
I really looked it up.
Either way, it's loosely based, and it's not even the same names, but it's a similar concept about oil frontier Western men.
Well, that kind of further leads down the method acting path of choosing the names of the characters. Daniel and Paul, I will be the first to admit, I totally thought they were supposed to be the same character.
Same.
I did too.
You mean Paul and Eli?
Yeah, Paul and Eli. I had no idea that they were twin brothers. They do not clarify that very well. I thought they were just trying to be sneaky, where Paul had snuck off and gone behind his family's back to sell the land, and Eli was his real name once he got there, so very confused.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one that thought that, because I felt really stupid, and I'm like, oh, I'm the only one that thought that. Nope, I'm not.
Right. I mean, because you never see them together ever, and even later on in the film, Paul is gone.
So actually, Eli Sunday was originally played by a different actor, and Paul Dano was just there to be Paul Sunday. But then, because of it was either a scheduling conflict or the guy just wasn't good, they had Paul Dano step in at the last minute and be Eli. And my God, what an acting job from a guy who just stepped in and picked up a script the day before.
Right. And I heard there was a rumor that the actor that originally was playing Eli was a little overwhelmed by Daniel Day-Lewis's method acting.
What? No.
Could you imagine just getting slapped around in the dirt like that? You're like, I'm an actor.
When someone method acts, how does a director even control that? What do they even do? Does anyone know?
Have you seen the documentary Man on the Moon, where Jim Carrey is playing Andy Kaufman?
Nope.
It's a pretty good one.
Oh, wait, maybe.
Add that to Emily's list.
I think I have, actually.
It's definitely worth watching the documentary. I mean, the movie's whatever for me.
Okay, so I think I've seen the movie. I haven't seen the documentary.
They are literally insane. They will not step out of character off set. Getting them on set, it's like they're in characters, so they are such troublemakers. They're a nightmare to cast and crew. And like in that documentary I'm talking about, he channels this girl's father who's dead, and he talks to her as him. So it's like they like completely disassociate themselves from the role, and it's like there's no time off. So like it's almost like a descent into madness a little bit. From my point of view, I hate it, like working in movies and stuff, but I don't know. You work in movies? Tell us, what do you mean? I mean, like, coming from the point of view of, like, going to film school, working behind the line, working behind the camera, and you have your shot set up, and this fucking person won't come in and hit their mark, or, like, they're like, give me the blood, and they're, like, in a different spot, you know? I think it's a lot like improvisational comedy, actually, and you have to have a director who's not so connected to the material that he's unwilling to let the actor just kind of go places, because a lot of the end of the movie, especially, was very loosely scripted, and they just let Paul Dano and Daniel Day-Lewis just run with it. So you really have to trust your actors, and then the actors have to trust the director to not stop their process.
How do you think Daniel Day-Lewis went about learning to method act being an unwanting father? Do you think someone sacrificed their child to just be like, you're just not going to be loved for a little bit until he feels good to get this Oscar?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, especially for the second 2 acts, because the first act, he's kind of, a loving father. And then as, the movie progresses, he goes further and further. So I feel bad for the kid who was used for that.
Yeah, he didn't do much after this. I checked out his IMDb. So I was like, oh, this little kid's doing pretty good. He did one other thing that I had never heard of, and that's his IMDb.
Oh.
Well, it was actually just a local casting call where the casting director just went to a school and met with students.
Nice.
To see like who in the area wants to be in a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. And the kid was so mature and adult-like in his dealings with the casting director that they're like, yeah, you're like a young Daniel Day-Lewis.
That's awesome.
So I have never seen a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. This was my first.
Wow.
And I'm not even kidding you. As I'm writing my notes, there was on the second page of notes, it was in Act 2, and I know we can talk about this then. I went, I really like this actor's voice. And then that's when I looked it up to see who it was.
Throughout this movie, it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. But aside from the acting, I think the camera work, and especially when you have 14 and a half minutes before there's any dialogue, I was just blown away by some of the visually striking things that happen in this first act.
No pun intended.
Including the pink mist that got created by hammering a beam onto HW's real father. Yes, that was a very, very intense scene. Did you guys have any specifically favorite scenes from this first act?
You remember when he first wakes up after breaking his leg?
Yeah.
Which it becomes I don't know if motif is the correct word, but him waking up not in a bed. It happens multiple times throughout this film, but like his just first words, who's like, no. I was just like, oh my God. For those to be the first things we heard and just to realize the gravity of the situation, I thought that was my favorite act as they panned through the rest of the desert, showing how far he was going to have to crawl.
Yeah, my favorite scene was definitely the one at the table where he's trying to negotiate with the Sundays to purchase the home. And the reason I loved that scene, and I'll get into it a little bit later, but the editing of that is just so geared to ramp up the tension of that scene. The way that it starts wide on the table and you see the father and Eli and Daniel Plainview, and then it narrows in to a shot of just Eli and Daniel. And then all of a sudden it's close-ups back and forth as they begin negotiating. It's just really well shot, and a dialogue scene that probably shouldn't have had as much tension as it did was just ramped up because of the shots they used.
Right, with intent. I like that.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any favorite scenes in the first act, but my first thing that I did notice that hit me pretty hard was the music and the sound design in the first act. And I ended up looking up to see who was doing the music, and it's Radiohead's guitarist, Johnny, what's his name? I wrote it down. I don't remember
his name.
What's his name? Johnny Greenwood. And I was very intrigued by it. It was very jarring and made all of the long shots in the first act a lot more tense and a lot more focused for me, because this was a very long beginning. And so that was the first thing that really stood out to me, was the music. You know, the strings were dissonant to each other and just sliding down on the strings, and then they meet in the middle and they disperse again. You know, it's just kind of these scales that are not really scales. And I played cello, so I get the concept of sliding as playing. And I really originally liked how it built that tension creatively, and how they had different percussive rhythms, but it got really overused after the first act, in my opinion.
That's funny that you mentioned sliding as a means of building, because I also played the trombone, and that it does the complete opposite.
I'm picturing a slide trombone now used in there instead. I did like how they built especially when they moved to Little Boston. That was really cool at the start of Act 1. But let's start getting into Act 2 here. Eli is a hilarious church pastor who goes over the top and does very interesting church type stuff. And he blames Daniel for the death of a man, not letting him bless the well. They end up striking oil. HW goes deaf as hell during that. Daniel Plainfield grows apart from his son because of this, eventually casting him away to a school for the deaf in San Francisco. Some guy named Henry shows up, and along the way he pretends to be his brother, which part of the reason HW was cast away was because he started his own jealousy fire on Henry, and Daniel beats him up. So some suits come along from Union Oil, and they try to buy Daniel's local interest, but Daniel refuses. And no, Standard Oil tries to buy it, and he refuses, and he strikes a deal with Union Oil to build a pipeline from California, from the prospect. So the Bandy Ranch remains an impediment, but Daniel becomes suspicious to the truth of Henry's character, and he murders him upon learning that he's an imposter, and he buries his body. Now, the second act is really long, so let's just get into how terrible I just did.
I'm not gonna lie. I was like, "Are you drinking, Matt? Are you drinking?"
Oh yeah, I'm drinking.
How's that half and half?
Oh,
I've seen this movie 4 or 5 times, and I have no idea what the fuck you just said.
And may God have mercy on your soul.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the biggest point that kind of got mixed up there in the shuffle was that he was trying to make a deal to get a pipeline from his oil field to the ocean so that he could surpass the railways and what they wanted to get, their money, and instead going with somebody who could ship it.
Right.
What do you think the purpose of Henry was? Like, why was he in this movie? It seems like he's added so late and is in it for such a short time. Like, I don't feel like it really revealed anything about Daniel's character.
I would argue that his purpose in the movie is to give Daniel something so sinful that he, in the next act, has to get baptized for again and forgive himself with the Lord, which, you know, the whole relationship to religion in this movie, Daniel doesn't really have. He's a greedy guy, but he's never done something that's truly against God.
Casting your kid away isn't enough, is what you're saying.
It wasn't even his kid.
All right, let's talk about adoption then, Wesley. But anyway, I think Henry Plainview was actually a really crucial part of Daniel's development as a character. And it's partially because he opens his heart in this trusting way, the way he opened up his heart to his not real son. And so it still grounded him, where he felt that he had someone there for him. But, you know, it drove him into madness as he started kind of spiraling through his mind about, you know, they're coming to get my money, or he's losing his power. And when he figures out that Henry's not actually his half brother, you know, he loses it.
He beat his adopted kid over it, and the jealousy fire proved to be true. You know, HW read that journal, like, I gotta fuck this guy up. Something smells.
And I loved that scene when HW lights the match and it glints in his eye before he drops it down. Oh, that was delightful.
Right.
I loved it.
Right. What did I just do?
Yeah, it felt like Henry, though, was just a replacement for Daniel of HW. Whereas, like, he was using HW to look like a family man. And now all of a sudden he's got a brother that shows up that he can now still use to be a family man. Like, now it's just a brother's thing instead of a father-son thing.
He started bringing him to the
point.
meetings and stuff. Yeah. I also want to point out Henry, I think, had one of the most glorious mustaches. And that's when I started thinking about, man, the mustaches in this film are great. You guys, weren't they they were so good. Like, you know?
I mean, I was thinking about how great the mustaches were way back when Daniel adopted HW and they're on the train and the baby starts pulling at the mustache. I was like, oh, that's so cute. Look at that mustache. So I was thinking about it way before you, Matt.
Yeah, you know what would be great is to get some CGI and get the baby a mustache. And the women could get some mustaches. Everybody needs a mustache.
Let's give it the Spielberg treatment.
No, we got to talk about the women because, Matt, you brought it up. Where are the women in this movie?
We've got Mary. We've got Mary Sunday, you know, little child actor.
That's funny. When did we learn her name?
They named the well after her.
We learn it when they're doing the well blessing. Daughter of this land, Mary Sunday.
Indeed.
I don't know. It's early 1900s on an oil field. I don't think there were many women in oil in the 1910s. Like, just like I didn't expect to see a lot of people of color in this. Like, I just didn't expect to see a lot of women in it.
But they're not even really on an oil field. They're in a community that gets turned into an oil field. So did everyone get kicked off their land entirely?
Well, we see crowd shots of women.
Yeah, and then we also hear bystanders yelling things like, "Sit that woman down, sir! Sit that woman." So, I mean, I think you're onto something here, Emily.
Well, was it necessary to keep the strong female characters out of this movie? That's my real question, is what I'm getting at, you know, and not even strong female characters with dialogue. Let's just flat out say Mary's the only one that has real dialogue with anyone.
Sign language.
Yeah, they take away her dialogue.
But even the other named female character, I have a quick game. What's the name of Daniel's sister? Yep.
Esther.
She's mentioned off screen as living in Wisconsin.
Yep, and they give her a name. She's the only other named female character besides Mrs. Sunday and her daughter Mary.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't even know Henry's name, so...
So, I have a question for you, Emily. Does this movie pass the Bechdel test?
Absolutely not.
It's Mary's...
Okay, well, either way, like, it bothered me a lot that there were not even female characters having real dialogue, even within the church. And I know that the main story was more about Daniel's conflict with himself and also his conflict with Eli, but it still felt like this long-ass movie couldn't have some important dialogue with women in it. I just felt really conflicted with that.
But if they added it in, it would be accused of pandering.
I mean, let's talk about this movie pandering anyway. I wasn't wanting to say that for Act 3, but this movie itself is a period piece and also somewhat of a adapted screenplay of something that was written by Upton Sinclair. You know, it is by definition, to me anyway, what Oscar bait is.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have feelings about what Oscar bait is or what that means?
I would agree with you, but I think a lot of times how well it's executed is where my feelings differ. So, like, in this case, I thought the pacing was really good, especially for how long it was. You know, later on for Battle of the Twits, like, we have some questions about the length of the film, and I struggled to find any scene that didn't make any sense or move the story forward.
How did you know what the questions that I'm going to ask you are ahead of time? Did you cheat?
But yeah, I don't know. Like I think it executed it really well in terms of being Oscar bait, but it's been done poorly before where they're like, oh, this is a good movie, and it's not at all, you know?
So I agree with you. It is executed really well. Like, to be honest, this movie is very good. But when I'm thinking about Oscar bait, the things that I think about are, you know, it's either a period piece or a modern piece drama that's like white people problems. And there's usually some standout music or those textbook perfect, interesting shots and cuts. They have some sort of Academy Award winning actor or actress, and usually based off of something else. It's not original. Am I wrong in just making those assumptions?
I mean, other than the it's not based on something original, because there have been Oscar movies
not
that...
Not always, I said. Not always.
I guess when I think of Oscar bait, I think of the word schmaltzy, which is just something that's kind of like overly sentimental and just kind of like Titanic is very Oscar baity because it's got like that romance story and it's sweeping and epic. This movie felt a lot like grittier. And under the other movie that came out this year that is kind of like it is No Country for Old Men, where maybe when we think Oscar baity now because of these two movies, we think of this type of movie. But at this time when this movie came out, Oscar baity was not defined as what There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men were doing.
That's a good point.
I love Warren Beatty's brother, Oscar Beatty.
Especially seeing this for the first time now in 2020, I can definitely agree with that.
All right, let's move on here. I'm going to take us through the wonderful conclusion of this movie in Act 3. So we start with Daniel being awoken by the elusive Mr. Bandy, and it looks like I do when I wake up every day in quarantine hungover. Bandy tells Daniel that the only way he's going to sell his land is that if he gets baptized. Eli, who is going to baptize Daniel, finally has the power over him. He continues to slap and yell at him while forcing Daniel to scream that he has abandoned his son in front of the entire church. They begin laying pipe, and they lay it oh so deep. Daniel brings HW back, and HW uses his deaf strength to punch his rage out on Daniel. At the restaurant with HW, Daniel gets super drunk, makes a super big scene in front of some of the people from the train company, starting to show us how much his alcohol abuse and craziness is really setting in. I want to make a side note that I think Daniel Day-Lewis would make a great drunk uncle.
Drunkle.
Yes, perfect. HW learns side language, and so does a girl. Cut to 1927, where HW and a small-sized Sunday girl are getting married. Eli...
Sorry.
Thank you. Eli comes to talk business with Daniel, where he finds him passed out in his own personal bowling alley right next to a meal of uneaten meat and lots of alcohol. In order to make a deal, Daniel forces Eli to embarrass himself by saying that he is a false prophet, just as Eli made Daniel embarrassed by confessing that he had abandoned his son. Daniel then gives his famous crazy milkshake speech before chasing Eli around and eventually beating him to death with a bowling pin. And I just love the final line of this movie where Daniel's butler comes down and he just turns around and goes, "I'm finished," right after he bludgeoned Eli to death.
Well, there was the blood.
There was the blood.
It does feel like the title is a little bit like a promise by the director. Like, please don't turn off the movie. Like, there will be blood. Like, hold on.
Right.
There will be blood. I promise.
I'm not going to lie. The first comment that I had in the beginning was, "Where is the blood?" That was my question. And then I was like, well, there it was.
Right. They tease it a little bit with the pink mist, as Wesley said earlier, getting hit by drilling equipment down a well. But man, at the end, they really smash home the title of the film.
This third act is just full of iconic scenes and lines. When I thought back on this movie, I didn't realize that every scene I remembered was from the third act.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got the baptism scene, you've got the confession scene, sorry, and you've got the scene between him and his deaf adult son, where he calls him a bastard in a basket, and then you've got the scene in the bowling alley with Eli, and just all three of those are just so good. So I'm just wondering, like, why do we remember the scenes that we do from movies?
I think, personally, him screaming, it's like all that passion translated. For whatever reason, I don't necessarily know why it doesn't for other actors, but just how intense Daniel Day-Lewis is, it really translates for those three scenes, and particularly the screaming.
I agree with that. And I think, especially for Daniel's character in the beginning, being a very mild mannered, controlled individual that had that powerful presence, losing it and acting a little bit more like Eli's character when he was preaching, you know, that control of his voice really, I don't know. Wesley, what am I trying to say?
Trying to say it was really good.
It was really good. Thanks, Wesley.
Yeah, no problem. I was gonna say the same thing, that the contradiction, or I guess counterpoint to how somewhat reserved Daniel is, and calculated and so conniving that you know he's got a plan the whole time, and then just to see these outbursts, and for those outbursts to take it somewhere where it's like, that can't be what you wanted, like you're gonna regret that, and then he turns to drinking, and an impressive amount of drinking.
Oh, especially in the bowling alley.
Oh yeah,
that one water.
Yeah, where he turns down a glass from Eli and just sits down and starts chugging on a handle. Ben, what do you think makes a scene iconic?
I mean, a lot of it for me, just because of the way I watch movies, is usually the way a shot is framed, or a specific like mannerism that an actor does. For instance, the look that he gives Eli right before he says, "I've abandoned my child," like when Eli's egging him on to keep saying it, he gives him this look out of the corner of his eye that just has so much like malice behind it and hatred. Like, that's the part that I remember from that. I completely forgot about "Give me the blood," which is now my favorite part of that scene. But like, what I always remember was just that look he gave him. So I think just to be a truly iconic scene, it just has to have some element that just ingrains itself in you and is something that you will always just look to and be like, oh yeah, there's that part of that scene that I have to look forward to.
I feel like the locations as well were so fucking good for those three specific scenes, and they were lit so differently. You know, you have the overlight lighting of a bowling alley, a private bowling alley at the end, where, you know, he's getting Eli to confess, and he you know, you get the famous milkshake. You have the baptism in the church, you know, where you have the camera in the center of the pews, and it's like a wide lens, and you see the whole structure of this olden church, as well as like the you know, his mansion, you know, after his son is telling him that he's leaving to go drill for oil in Mexico, and he's leaving him, becoming his competitor, in fact. You just see how dimly lit it is, and it's just amazing.
And I think it's really interesting too when you think about the first two acts of the movie, how it takes place in these wide open spaces, and then all of a sudden the third act is in these confined spaces and inside interior rooms. Like, it just really shows the way that Daniel kind of like secludes into his own self and mind and becomes just self-obsessed.
Ben, did you just come to that realization?
I did.
I just wanted to ask, because I definitely didn't think of that.
That was a good epiphany there.
Ooh.
So another thing with these movies is that Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, is very much an auteur. And for those who don't know, an auteur is a filmmaker whose style and complete control over all elements of production give a film its personal and unique stamp. Other examples of actor or directors like this would be like Tarantino, Spielberg, Scorsese, Wes Anderson. Guys who you say, like, that's a Wes Anderson movie, and you could use that to describe other movies that they didn't even make, and you know what it means.
I have not seen any other Paul, whatever his name, Anderson. I haven't seen any of his other movies. So
Johnny and the Whatevers.
Would you explain a little bit about what you mean by that for this movie and translating it to other movies?
So there are things within Paul Thomas Anderson movies, and it's easier to explain other auteurs that I know better. I only know a couple Paul Thomas Anderson movies.
I can answer that for P.T.
Perfect.
Anderson.
Thanks, Wesley. I'm sorry, is his name P.T. Anderson? Is that what you said?
That is what he goes by, yeah.
Paul Thomas.
P.T. Anderson.
Yeah, my description's really short. The movies are really long.
Okay. I mean, that's one thing, but he does have a distinct style of the way he uses music in his movies, especially montages set to music. Now, this one's a little different in that it kind of veered away from that, and all of the music montages were more set to orchestral stuff. But in other movies like Magnolia or Boogie Nights, you have like iconic songs that are framed to help tell the story through montage. Another thing about it is that he just has these unique camera angles. He is known for working with method actors like The Master. He worked with Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Method actors tend to like to work with him because of his directorial style and just that freedom he allows the actors.
He must be a very patient man.
I've never met him, but yeah, probably.
The last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was who is the true antagonist in this film? Because I felt like even though Eli's conflict with Daniel in this movie was extreme, I felt that Eli was taken as a joke and that maybe Daniel wasn't an anti-hero, but he was the protagonist and the antagonist of himself, and he was really his downfall. Thoughts?
I would probably agree with that. I do think that the way that the movie's structured and because of its length, it really is probably the antagonist changes throughout the movie. I guess, at what point did you feel, Emily, that Daniel Plainview started to be a bad person?
Well, probably when he sent his son away. That was probably the point where I'm like, you don't seem like a good person. You had so much affection, and it was like physical affection, which I wasn't prepared for, especially for a period piece like this. And you don't really see a lot of that.
I think for me, it was much earlier in the movie. When I first had an inkling of anything, it didn't come across so overtly cruel. But it's when Daniel and HW first get to the Sunday farm, and we already know why he's there and that he's got the intel, but he uses HW and this we're hunting quail as an excuse to get the dish.
I think, yeah, especially because HW has a crisis of conscience. You know, he's like, what are we going to pay them for it? And he's like, well, we're not going to pay them oil prices. We'll pay them quail prices. And that's when you start to slowly realize, you know, Daniel Plainview's he's a go-getter, baby, and you gotta...
I agree. I just don't think he was an obvious not a good person at that point, because to me, how they were portraying him is he was a go-getter. He's a rags to riches kind of person, and you know, this is how corporations were successful, and so maybe I was brainwashed with that ideology.
So you don't think corporations are bad people?
Apparently not.
This all makes a lot more sense.
I think there was an interesting comparison, though, to capitalism as being Daniel's religion versus actual, like, religion being Eli's religion. And the way that those two things kind of played off each other, like they're both fanatical about what they do, but they just have different gods that they worship.
That makes sense.
Emily, why don't you give us your review of this movie?
Are you sure you want it?
Yeah, we want yours first.
Keep it short.
It is shorter than my other ones have been in
This is the first episode.
In practicing. Oh my God. You guys suck. This movie is a methodical and long film plotting through a contrived plot. There are beautiful long shots and strained haunting music by Radiohead. Daniel Day-Lewis plays an excellent antagonist to his own protagonist, with a commanding presence and impressive voice acting. Overall, definitely a good movie, but I will not watch it again, ever. I rate it 4 flaccid oil geysers out of 5. It gets a 4 out of 5 because it is a good movie, but it's so boring, thus the flaccid oil geysers. They're just blah, blah, blah.
So is flaccid oil geyser a good thing or a bad thing?
Kind of a combination. It's a mixed review.
It's a good thing, but they're not, like, hard. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because liquids can be hard.
Those poor men down in the well.
I thought you guys would enjoy that.
I'll give you guys my review. A truly unsettling movie from start to finish, and that's really saying something as it's just over 2.5 hours. The score drives your emotion, and Mr. Day-Lewis makes your skin crawl in what I'm going to coin as a good way. Despite the personal preference for more extensive color palette, the camera angles and use of focus in this movie kept me visually engaged. I'm giving this movie 9 evangelist bowling pins out of 10 because you only need 1 to kill an evangelist.
Wow.
So my review is that the beauty of There Will Be Blood is in its simplicity. That this simple story of a man driven by greed and ambition at the expense of all else can be so thoroughly engrossing is a testament to the director, cinematographer, editor, composer, and actors present. Sadly, though, this movie is the poster child for the parts being greater than the whole, since I found the movie as a whole to be a bit of a slog and overly self-important. More than likely as a result of overhype both by myself and the film standing within the cultural zeitgeist. I gave it 1 bastard in a basket out of 5. And bastards in a basket are, bad things.
So it's 4 loved and wanted children out of 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I get what you mean. I like that you talked about its self-importance.
How about it, Matt?
There Will Be Blood is a long-ass film, so this is going to be a short-ass review. You have an oil man, you have a crazy priest, and shit gets crazy, and let's just say the title stays true to the movie. Hang in there, folks. 10 out of 12 mustaches. Handlebar mustaches.
Can I ask why you picked 12?
Yeah, I was just curious. The same thing.
I just wanted to keep it interesting.
All right, now it's time for the second half of the show. Everybody's going to be new favorite segment after we do a couple more of these. So I will pose 5 rounds of questions to our less than expert contenders. Let them try to convince me who the smartest is this week. And after all 5 questions have been answered, I will decree my judgment. The winner of each round will get 1 point. Second place gets 0. So, Twits, are you ready?
Give me the blood.
So the loser of this first question will score it right away, and the loser has to immediately take a shot. So, gentlemen, what is in your glasses?
I've got milk and I've got bourbon, and I'm gonna let you choose what I'm drinking.
You're gonna let me choose, or you're gonna let Ben choose if he wins?
No, I'll let you choose. You're the judge. Jury.
Right, I'll let Emily choose then.
I'll choose. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, my milkshake's gone, so I'm just doing a shot of vodka.
Nice. Excellent. Alrighty, on to the first question then. The early concept of this podcast was to do movies from 1999, but we changed the idea since someone else beat us to that year. Daniel Day-Lewis didn't make a movie in 1999, which is considered to be one of the greatest years in film. So you are adding an entirely new character to a 1999 movie, and he will be played by Daniel Day-Lewis. Who is this character? Why should they be added? And why is Daniel Day-Lewis the best person to play him? We're going to start off with Ben.
I think Daniel Day-Lewis needs to be added to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So the Star Wars universe has always been about casting legitimate dramatic actors in their films, from Alec Guinness to Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor to the new ones with Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, and Domhnall Gleeson. Well, there's no more legitimate dramatic actor than Daniel Day-Lewis. So Daniel Day-Lewis will play a character named Day-Lewis. He's a member of the Jedi Council at the start of The Phantom Menace and an old friend of Qui-Gon Jinn. When Qui-Gon goes to the Jedi Council to ask to have Anakin be his apprentice, the Jedi Council refuse, with the exception of Day-Lewis, who disagrees about sensing Anakin's vulnerability to the dark side. Day-Lewis, who is currently without an apprentice, offers to be the master of Anakin, and the Council accepts. The remainder of the movie involves Day-Lewis accompanying Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on their journey to uncover the truth of the Sith. On Naboo, just prior to the fight with Darth Maul, it is revealed that Maul is not the apprentice of Darth Sidious, but is actually the apprentice of Darth Day-Lewis. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battle Maul and Day-Lewis. Day-Lewis kills Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan kills Maul, before Obi-Wan and Day-Lewis lightsaber battle, causing Day-Lewis to escape the battle and retreat back to Sidious, where he reports that he has met a boy who had more dark side in him than any person he's ever met. Day-Lewis would then play the Dooku role in Attack of the Clones, as the Jedi Council wonders how a Sith was able to infiltrate their high ranks. This also provides more emotional weight to the end of Attack of the Clones, since Anakin would now be fighting his first master. Daniel Day-Lewis would be perfect for this role due to his dramatic chops and his commitment to character. Lucas had to name Daniel's Jedi character as Day-Lewis, as this was the only way to keep him tethered to the real world, as we said that he should do in There Will Be Blood. If anyone could tap into the method behind the Jedi lifestyle and experience fully, it's Daniel Day-Lewis. This makes the story better, the prequel trilogy better, and Daniel Day-Lewis's filmography better.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
First off, My mouth was open the whole time. I was just like, yes, Star Wars. But you said this would help tie him to the real world. So would he be like in space in his mind? Like, how would he treat this method acting?
Well, I mean, he would walk around thinking he had abilities that he doesn't have. Like, he would think he's mind controlling people, and like he can open automatic doors just by the flash of his fingers.
You do want to get me a coffee.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Matt, let's hear your answer.
Okay. Well, I just want to go ahead and say before I start, my Daniel Day-Lewis will have a mustache in his role. Okay. So I chose The Sixth Sense. Everyone's seen the movie once. It's earned 6 Oscar noms, didn't win any of them. I think the main problem that most people have is once they've seen it, they know the twist, the movie's lost all of its gusto. I intend to add Daniel Day-Lewis as Haley Joel Osment's father to add a dose of intensity and to give the film another layer of, ultimately make it rewatchable again. So, spoiler alert, Haley Joel Osment can see dead people and is an unwilling, sorry, Ben, is an unwilling medium. And Bruce Willis is a dead child psychologist who doesn't know he's dead yet. But what about his father? His father would be an intense disciplinarian who's written in a way to add another layer of ambiguity. So is his father a ghost or is he not a ghost? But it would not be revealed in the film at all. It would be left open to debate by audiences. Now, this would balance out many of the other characters in the movie, the ancillary characters that don't necessarily shine, like his mother. And it would also lend itself to many great scenes of conflict and passion with Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment, and Daniel Day-Lewis. And it would also ultimately help it earn more nominations because it didn't get nominated for Best Actor, and it would get over the hump. And I think his acting would have helped it win Best Supporting Actor for Haley Joel Osment. So, in final, ghosts need to be intense. Daniel Day-Lewis is intense, and that would make this entire movie so much better.
Just said that we don't know if he's a ghost, though.
Right.
So if ghosts are intense and this movie needs people to be intense because Daniel Day-Lewis is intense, he would have to be a ghost. So you just spoiled it.
Well, I mean, like, it's open for debate, but I think that I would hope half the people that watch the film would think he's a ghost, and then the other half are like, no, he's obviously still alive.
Well, there's only 2 options, so they probably have to fall into one of those, like, 50% groups.
I fucking hope so. I fucking hope so, baby.
I've never seen The Sixth Sense before.
Did I spoil it for you, or you already know?
I knew what happened, but I was definitely very confused of what this father role was. I don't really know anything about the characters.
You're not alone.
Okay, would you mind expanding on, is it Haley something or other?
Haley Joel Osment, and that's another reason I chose Daniel Day-Lewis. You need 3 name actors together. It's magic.
That's a great point. That should have been in the original.
That is a good point. Why didn't you bring that up earlier? Can you explain a little bit who this character is? Because I don't actually
Haley
know.
Joel Osment?
Yep.
Okay, so he is he sees dead people. He's a medium, but the thing is, the dead people don't know that they're dead. And Bruce Willis's character is a dead child psychologist who...
Now, I'm going to stop you right there because both times you've said it, I thought it was a psychologist for dead children. So you need to figure out your pausing there.
Sorry. Yeah, so he's a child psychologist who works with Haley Joel Osment, and he says, hey, I think you need to start talking to these people because you have a gift. And by the end of the movie, the twist is that Bruce Willis realizes he was dead the entire time.
Tune in next time for when we review Sixth Sense. All right. Matt, I don't like the Inception style that you're trying to go for here. I want to know the answer.
I thought Inception too, and he was like, I'll leave it up to interpretation. And I was like, Inception much?
Ben, I am very curious how Daniel Day-Lewis would method act being a Jedi. That's
right.
Very intriguing to me, but I am going...
But the Jedi is just a mystical religion. He would just have to become really religious in his practices.
Give me the blood.
I mean, you didn't have to sell me. It was just an interesting point. Ben won, but more so because I want to hear Emily tell Matt which to take a shot of.
No, you're definitely taking a shot of the bourbon.
All right.
Chase it down with that milk. Woo! Ooh.
and then chase them out with a bourbon and keep going until they're both gone.
Now I know how HW felt.
Actually, not bad.
I thought it was gin in the movie. Was it bourbon?
I thought it was vodka or moonshine.
Yeah, I thought it was vodka. Doesn't
I
really
don't know.
matter. It's alcohol.
Who cares? Alcohol
Question
and milk.
2. There Will Be Blood was nominated for 8 Oscars. It won 2 of them for Best Actor and Best Cinematography. Let's play Oscar Thief. You have the power to take or give an Oscar from There Will Be Blood. Which category would you choose, and what other 2000 nominated movie would you replace?
2007 nominated movie?
Yeah, 2007. That's...
You said 2000?
Yeah, I'm real bad at math, Emily. So, Matt, we'll start with you this time.
So I would take away the win for art direction from Sweeney Todd, and I would give it to There Will Be Blood. Now, if you're curious what an art director's job is, here it is. Their duties include all things art department. They're responsible for department coordination, props, costumes, construction of sets, keeping track of the art department's budget and scheduling, as well as overall quality control. They are also liaison to other departments like special effects, property, transportation, and locations. Sweeney Todd is undeserving of what it is in that it's just Victorian clothing. It's a single weird location with weird white makeup and tons of hair gel in a live-action Tim Burton musical versus There Will Be Blood, which is a historical Western epic that captures the place and time with exterior and interior locations, spectacular costumes, and mustaches. The props were amazing, old vehicles, trains, and all the tools used to drill and create a pipeline, as well as the fantastic and gigantic effects of striking oil. It deserved to win this award over Sweeney Todd.
So I want to take away the best editing Oscar from Bourne Ultimatum and give it to There Will Be Blood. So while Bourne Ultimatum certainly had more edits, the use of edits within There Will Be Blood were used to greater effect as they were able to ramp up the tension on even simple conversations and tell the story and themes through the shots used and not used. I already talked about the scene at the dinner table where Daniel's offering to buy the Sunday land. We see that tension and focus shift within the scene as Eli inserts himself into the conversation, and the editor perfectly used which camera angles would best provide the scene with increased tension as we meet Daniel's primary foe within the film. The editor knew exactly when to cut to a reaction shot or linger on the actor's face. Much of Daniel Day-Lewis's acting style is done through improvisational moments provided by his full immersion into his character. Day-Lewis is the person he's playing, and from that, unscripted and unplanned character moments happen all the time as a result of him being in the moment with his character. The full shape of Daniel Playview is allowed to be presented due to the editing choices made, and in less skilled hands, the character would not have been as fully realized as it was. Bourne Ultimatum uses many quick cuts and cheap editing trips to ramp up tension, especially on action scenes, and the editing of Bourne Ultimatum feels no different than the editing of other Bourne movies, which did not win Oscars and was not even nominated. Now, when you're talking about Sweeney Todd, the art direction of Sweeney Todd is one of the only good things about that movie. The set pieces evoke the Victorian time period and adds in the gothic aesthetic that Tim Burton usually attempts, but fits it all within the London setting. The world feels fully realized, and the use of color in the sets and costumes that highlight the deep reds of the blood and of Joanna feel purposeful and is used to great effect. There Will Be Blood's art direction is very minimal due to the outdoor setting. It didn't feel any different from other Western movies or movies of that time period. The only true great art direction comes in the third act, whereas Sweeney Todd is tremendous throughout.
All right, Matt, what's your counter?
All right, so I would go ahead and counter your arguments for There Will Be Blood, saying in the second act, you have striking oil and the fantastical nature of art direction in the first act. That's all in the props, the tools being used, all those nitty gritties, as I would say, as well as, the actual set of being wide out and open in Texas is just fantastic. Now, when it comes to the Bourne Ultimatum, editing an action film is so much harder than editing a nuanced piece like this. There are plenty of instances of which, as a conversation escalates, you transfer to a close-up. That's a technique used in film school. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad editing job. I'm just saying that the Bourne Ultimatum had a much tougher time using that shaky cam footage, editing together a cohesive action piece.
But nothing about the editing of Bourne Ultimatum is revolutionary. This editing is the same editing done in every action movie ever. The look of Bourne Identity and Bourne Supremacy before it it doesn't really change going to Bourne Ultimatum. It's not like all of a sudden it's a new film. Like, it's the same editing techniques used already. So why in this year did they give it to Bourne, whereas they didn't in years prior? Whereas There Will Be Blood's editing is revolutionary because it's taking these simple dialogues between characters and filling them with so much tension just through the way that it's cut.
All right, moving on to question 3. Some people, including Emily, feel this movie was way too long. You are the editor of There Will Be Blood and have been asked to cut down the runtime of the movie. What is the first thing that you would cut, Ben?
So I realize it feels a little off to say that There Will Be Blood deserves best editing and then immediately jump into a question about how to edit the film differently, but I'm going to do it anyway. So there are 678 shots used in There Will Be Blood, and they average 13.3 seconds per shot. The Hollywood average for seconds per shot is between 3 and 4 seconds. The long extended shots used in There Will Be Blood are oftentimes wordless, and the length is not there for plot or dialogue reasons, but just to ruminate. I want to cut off 2 seconds from every shot in the movie.
Oh my God.
I'm going to keep all 678 shots intact and simply chop them down by 2 seconds on average. I'd be able to cut 20 minutes off of this movie if I just took 2 seconds away from every shot. Even at around 11 seconds per shot, the film would be allowed the space to breathe and think about its characters and provide ample time for Daniel Day-Lewis to do his thing. With the time cut off, though, the film wouldn't feel so meditatively up its own ass and would allow it to be more accessible and less Oscar bait feeling, while not depriving the editor of the ability to shape the tension and characters on the screen.
Oh, okay.
That was the most math-related
Yeah, that was one of my notes.
answer ever, and I loved that.
I just wrote math.
Math.
Oh my God.
All right, Matt.
Okay.
Get out your calculator.
Jesus Christ. So I think it was extremely difficult to cut any scene from this film because each scene flows from one to the next with purpose and intent. But if I was forced to cut any scene or element from the movie, I would cut out Daniel Plainfield's dealing with Standard Oil. It's 2 specific scenes that are longer, and they deal with the character development of Daniel as a drunk and a stubborn bastard, and his dealings with other oilmen, cementing them as his rivals. I would instead make the main rival the man that got off the train when they first arrived to town during the oil boom. He would be a representative of Standard Oil, and it would create a larger conflict to the scene. Daniel would be able to gloat, and he would be able to tell him he's too late and send him on a wild goose chase. Go ahead and look east.
I believe you said Plainfield, so I'm docking you a half point.
Oh no, the bourbon! No. Oh wait, I'm blaming that on the milk.
All right. Question.
Every time, I'm so sorry, Wesley, but every time he says milk, he says malk, and all I can think is Julian Smith's milk video on YouTube.
Oh
Anyone?
shit! I gotta make sure to. Thank you, Emily. I'm gonna definitely hit it one of my answers harder with the milk.
Daniel Plainview has an iconic mustache in this movie. But what is the best mustache in any movie?
And this is a debate style again, right, Wesley?
That is correct.
Okay.
The best mustache in any movie ever is going to go to White Goodman, played by Ben Stiller from Dodgeball. Now, this is the best mustache in any movie, and here's why. Out of all the classic mustache styles, the chevron, the imperial, the dolly, the painters, pencil, Fu Manchu, handlebar, walrus, the Hitler, the handlebar mustache is the most recognizable and widely considered the strongest and most macho. This mustache gives Ben Stiller's character such a larger presence on screen and accentuates all of his facial expressions for his comedy. This look works perfectly for White Goodman as a fitness instructor who's better than you, and he knows it. Other mustaches will try to hide something from you, obscuring the top lip. White Goodman's character doesn't hide anything from you, and you get a bonus soul patch, which works great for his character in all comedies in general.
All comedies.
Great answer, Matt. All right, Ben.
A truly great character mustache should represent who they are and tell you immediately how they think about themselves. The mustache of Captain Hook in the movie Hook tells you right away what a self-important prick he is. The mustache forms hooks on its ends, representing not only his name, but also the fact that he has a hook. It begs the question, What came first, the name, the hooks in his mustache, or the hook on his hand? We don't know. The design of the mustache was also a completely unique spin on an already iconic character, since the Disney Captain Hook had a mustache that looked more like hands of a clock. The movie also features the single greatest mustache special effect in the history of film. When the clock starts ticking, his mustache ticks along with it. This is done in extreme close-up, and after watching that scene several times, I still can't tell you how they did it. Since the extreme close-up rules out fishing line and it doesn't appear to be movement of the upper lip by Hoffman. Lastly, characters interact with the mustache and provides intel into the type of relationship the characters have, specifically the relationship between Smee and Hook, since we see Smee use his earwax to provide structure and shape to said mustache. White Goodman from Dodgeball. Now, he has an interesting mustache to look at for sure, and it tells us a little bit about the character through the mustache design, but there are no moments within the movie that are built around the mustache. It is not a plot integral mustache. It is not a character and world-building mustache. In fact, it's basically just the Hulk Hogan mustache, but not blonde. Mustaches should have meaning, and White Goodman's does not.
Truly a blasphemous statement from Ben coming out there. Not knowing how they did the special effect of the mustache tick. Clearly they used drugs. Have you ever taken an Adderall before, Ben? It's just a facial tick on Dustin Hoffman. And furthermore, what style of mustache is that even? Is that the curly handlebar? Is that the walrus? I can't see his top lip. If I was deaf, I wouldn't be able to know what he was saying. So, like HW, I hate Dustin Hoffman's character as Hook. I can't read his lips at all. He comes across as a fake dude, and just because I know there's earwax in his mustache makes it even grosser. Now, White Goodman, that handlebar mustache. Wait, no, it's the fuck. No, shit.
You got like 8 seconds.
White Goodman rocks, and he's better than you, and he knows it. Handlebar mustache. Best.
Ben, do you want to?
No, I'm good.
You don't even want to say anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'll be honest, that was the question I was most excited for, and you guys did not disappoint.
You really delivered on that one. I'm really happy about it.
All right, now it's time for everybody's favorite question, or it will be coming up. We are going to have both of you pitch what you would ideally have as a reboot, prequel, or sequel for There Will Be Blood. We're starting with Ben.
I would like to see a musical reboot of There Will Be Blood, done in the musical style of Les Miserables, where every piece of dialogue is sung. Instead of a story of redemption like Les Mis, it would be the story of a man's descent into greed at the expense of all else. I want to change none of the actors, as Daniel Day-Lewis has done a musical before, and I'm sure he's up to the task. Think about all of the tremendous songs we would get from this movie. And because it's a musical, I'm going to have to sing, so just so you know. You have the crew of the oil derricks singing at night. Oil, the blood of our old earth. Toil, how men can find their worth. Oil, a liquid form of gold. Toil, we'll do it till we're old. Or how about Daniel singing in the church? I've abandoned my boy, I've abandoned my child, sent him out into the world like a dog to the wild. I am a sinner, give me the blood. I've forsaken all else in pursuit of this crud. And let's not forget Eli's big moment at the end. I have succumbed to the darkness, a false prophet running farther from God. A superstition, God has forgotten me. I've never heard him. The lie of the mission, the lie of the mission. This movie would completely work and would win all of the Oscars. The title is There Will Be Blood.
Oof. Oof. Really shoehorning that title in there.
Ben, were you in band or choir? Just a quick question.
Can you not tell?
All right, Matt, let's hear your songs.
Oh, God.
I think I need just like a second to breathe. I was laughing the whole time.
No dice. This train keeps moving.
Okay, I guess this train keeps moving. Keeps plodding along like this movie.
I chose a sequel in a more serious fashion.
Whoa.
No attack. Okay, so I chose a sequel that would follow H.W. Plainview as he drills for oil in Mexico from 1927 through 1938. As we age, we become our parents. We live long enough and we see their faces repeat in time. We see H.W. navigate starting his own business with nothing but the knowledge that has been passed on to him with the father. He has the struggles of being a deaf American in Mexico, with a wife, having his first child, and starting a family. He would eventually become quite successful despite the challenges against him. His path would start to mirror his father as power, money, and influence grew. His wife would slowly be pushed away and eventually die in the second birth of his child. H.W. would become ruthless and start to become a feared leader in oil dealing and murderous operations, and escalating his stature to higher than that of his father. Around 1938, Mexico nationalized their oil industry and they basically stole back all of the oil from all foreign operators and all those assets. So because of that, H.W. would be left a powerless and broken man, mirroring that of his father, and it would be filmed as a Western on the Mexican frontier. Subtitles would also be quite heavily used, as well as some interesting sound design. It would immediately become Oscar bait. Both films would complement each other, but would also be able to stand by themselves without needing to have seen the other. The film ends with H.W. contemplating suicide before drinking a tall glass of cold milk. The title is called There Will Be Milk.
Well, that was an excellent debate for our first episode
of the Battle of Twits. Ooh. So, can you do those finger guns again, please, Ben?
Very ghost-like.
So just to recap, question 1 was, what movie would you add a Daniel Day-Lewis character to? Ben said Star Wars Phantom Menace. Matt said Sixth Sense. We gave that one to Ben. Starting off on a hot streak. Question 2, Oscar Thief. Ben, you said you would take away the editing for Bourne Ultimatum. And Matt, you said that you would take it away from Best Art Direction. Matt, I have to applaud you. I really enjoyed the fact that you defined the role of what the art director does and, you know, what that's being awarded for. Basically, we're just giving this one to Matt. We're going to get through it. They were both good answers. I did like Matt's more, though, and I think that was a better choice. Question 3, how would you cut down... I mean, I'm going to read this one specifically because my answer is going to entail. What is the first thing that you would cut down from this movie? Now, Ben, I loved your math, and I loved the creativity, but in my mind, when I say what's the first thing you would cut down, and your answer is one of everything, I don't know about that. Matt's answer is an actual scene from the movie. While thinking about it, it's a scene that I don't recall that much, so I think it was an excellent choice.
Either. Both Wesley and I were like, we don't really know what he was talking about, and so that's probably a good thing that he cut that.
And I also, Ben, think that the hack and slash, like, it doesn't seem like it would be a perfect solution, where there's probably scenes that do use every bit of it. So if your solution is cut 2 seconds from every scene, I see that being a problem and more complicated than cutting a plot line.
It was more, Wesley and I were talking about how it's not cutting 2 seconds from every shot. It was an average of 2 seconds. And so that would take a lot more time. And so Wesley and I kind of went back and forth on this, and we decided that it would be, as like an editor cutting something down from this, we thought that Matt's was not only easiest, but it made the most sense, even though we thought yours would actually be a really good answer too.
So despite Matt calling him Daniel Plainfield, I'm also scoring this one for Matt. On to question 4. Again, my absolute favorite question. I was so happy with this. Who has the best mustache in any movie? Matt, again, you started off hot with the giving names of all the different mustache types. Absolutely loved it. But you just kind of lost it in the debate and defending yourself against Ben's points, where it was just kind of a one-sided battle there. So that one goes to Ben. And on to the final question for prequel, reboot, or sequel. Ben, you wanted to do a musical in the style of Les Mis. Not really a fan. I don't think it would add that much to this movie.
I loved it. I loved it so much.
I'll be honest, I loved it too. It's like, it reminds me of like a South Park type of.
And I absolutely love that you sang the stuff too. So huge points for that. Matt, I think your movie makes a little sense, but you started off talking about how he would take on the things of his father when we know that he is not his father. Now,
I brought up the point of, he really would have a lot of features, even though he was adopted. And Wesley's like, well, it's not in his blood. And
yeah,
like,
and this is called There Will Be
Give
Blood.
me the blood. Give me the blood.
This movie is called There Will Be Blood, so we know that
My movie's called There Will Be Milk.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Also, I had a question of your point of struggling being deaf in Mexico when he speaks sign language. So either he doesn't have a language barrier because sign language is universal, or his
interpreter. Sorry, I should have said that. His interpreter only speaks English and sign language, so.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Ben gets that point, bringing us to 3-2 in favor of Ben for this first round of Battle of the Twits. Ben is the oil baron this week, and as such, what movie are you going to have Matt live tweet?
I'd really like to watch, and along with Matt live tweeting, Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace.
Oh.
I know what a huge Jake Lloyd fan he is.
Oh, hell yeah.
I need to experience that.
Okay.
And as extra punishment, maybe you all need to have one of those mustaches that Matt described earlier this episode.
I can't grow it. I'll have to buy one online.
The only mustache Matt grows is the Hitler. It just grows in as that.
No, it's not even a mustache. It's just Hitler.
Like an image. Oh my God.
Thank you everyone for listening. Please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We all have Letterboxd accounts also that we will be connecting to our Twitter. So be on the lookout for that and other reviews of movies that we do. Again, if you liked what you heard, please tell your friends about it. Rate us on iTunes, or just reach out to us personally through idrinkyourpodcast@gmail.com and send us your direct feedback. I read everything that comes through that email, and I take things very personally. So please feel free to attack as you desire.
Perfect. What are we watching next week?
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Yeah, next week we are sticking with the auteur idea, and we are watching Michael Bay's Transformers.
Yeah. All right.
No.
Yeah, so thank you for listening. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.